So anyway, early on, when I first started doing the show, and people started to come up and recognize you in the streets, and you kind of get a little pumped up about that. And Ellen and I went to the Antiques Roadshow at the convention center, and this middle-aged gal comes up and says, "Oh, I know you. You're on that show every week, aren't you?" And I said, "Well, yeah." I'm getting all pumped up about it, and Ellen's rolling her eyes like, "You got to be kidding me." She said, "Do you mind if I go get my mom? She would just love to meet you." And I said, "Fine." So she went and got her mom and came back and said, "Mom, I want you to meet Rex early." Talk about let the air out of my balloon. And of course, my wife was rolling over laughing as she
That's a
walked away.
get out of jail free card. You
I'd
could
say
say
couldn't believe
anything and
it.
they would have attributed it
Said,
to Rex.
"I want you to meet Rex early." Of course, Rex is, what, 2 years older than I am? Yeah. But
Got a question here.
if you think Phil in his shoes, when I was first asked to do this, and then I'll be quiet, but the guy's a legend, and when I first started doing it, I had a guy come up to me and literally say to me, which is still one of the funniest things anybody ever said to me, said, "Hey kid, you'll more than fill that seat, but you'll never fill those shoes." I thought, boy, that's a lovely thing. You know, right for Hallmark.
One, I was over visiting my aunt at an old folks' place, and I walked out and I noticed across the hall there was an elderly man, and he was looking at me, and as we walked down the hall, Barbara and I, he was sort of following me. I turned around and he said, "Ain't you the TV guy?" I said, "That's me." He said, "When are you going to fix my TV?"
You had some good moments, Rex. One of them was intended to be scripted that went awry, and one wasn't scripted. But the scripted one, remember when John Myers retired from Congress? What was that, the 7th District? And how many people were in that primary? 14?
Yeah.
14 people in the primary. And Ann anticipated that you might have some trouble remembering a good portion of those 14 candidates from your party when you were chairman. I don't know if you remember, you had written them.
Wrote them on your
we
hand.
have a no notes policy, but you had written them on the inside of your palm, not accounting for the fact that the lights in the studio get a little bit hot, and you had just returned from one of your Florida trips where you were already kind of hot and sweaty. As I recall, you looked down to find your notes, and all it was a nice smudge. So,
And Ann pointed that out.
Well, in the interest of full disclosure,
well, that was the attempted script moment, the unscripted moment, and I think this was unscripted. You were doing some of your, awful thin pancake that doesn't have two sides, and noon balloon from Rangoon, and you said something. You said, "How about that, Ann?" And she said, "Rex, I can't match you. You have all your Rexisms. I can't fight that." And you said, "But Ann, you have something even better." And she said, "What's that?" And you said, "Well, I know every time you say something or start talking, I get an aneurysm," which I thought was a pretty good line. Was that unscripted?
Probably was.
Probably was.
he practiced that in front of the mirror like he does all of them. Are you kidding me?
Practiced it at the Antelope Club.
Oh, absolutely.
I want to do one quick story about Shella, then we'll start with this. But to think that he doesn't pay attention and know what's going on, but he does, because I was state chairman at the time, and I'm doing the show, and a young man that worked for me by the name of C.J. McClanahan came into my office. He said, "Hey, when you do the show this week, my parents are in town." He said, "Would you mention my name on the show?" And I said, "Sure, what's in it for me?" He said, "Well, I'll mow your yard." I said, "Okay, I'll mention your name." So one of the questions that day was, who were the Republican candidates for Secretary of State? And I thought if I slipped C.J. McClanahan's name in the middle of the list, nobody paying attention, I'd get my yard mowed and be good. So sure enough, we're going through this list, and I said, "And C.J. McClanahan and so and so and so." Shella goes, "Stop, who is C.J. McClanahan?" And I said, "Well, he's a guy that works for me that said he'd mow my yard if I mentioned his name on TV." And so the following Monday, the young man came to my office and said, "That's not exactly what I had in mind for myself." But he did mow my yard.
We have a question.
Yes, a question for Mr. Shella. Will you share with us the most awkward moment that you may have had here on the show.
Well, yeah, this is for the website, is it? I mean, as long as we're talking about Rex he made a couple of comments that I think it's kind to say that they weren't politically correct. And as you've seen, we don't edit this show, and so I just kept moving. Just head down.
You're going to dangle that carrot out there and not go into it?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure it behooves me to repeat them.
So close, Joe.
But
He has changed in retirement,
yeah,
hasn't he?
I think that's the answer to the question.
Thank you.
But we've not really stopped. I mean, you like to tell people aside from technical issues or production errors, we've only stopped the show one time in 25 years, right?
Yeah, for editorial reasons, and it's because we were all laughing at someone who we all knew who was about to become a prominent political figure, and it was not kind laughter. And I said, "Time out. We're not going to put that on TV."
Well, it wasn't laughter; it was tears. We
laughter to the point of tears. Yeah, it was. Yeah. See,
Well,
He should go nameless.
he's getting worried. I've never heard a tentative Jim Will. I mean,
well, there's a reason why we left that off the air. There's no reason to put it on now.
All right.
First of all, congratulations on all your success and your retirement, and all the panel, and best wishes to Brandon.
Thank you.
I'm not sure what you started out of high school or whenever to do. Was this what you set out to do, basically? And if not, what career career path would you have chosen?
I'm happy to tell you that when I arrived at St. Cloud State University in Minnesota, I was already accepted to the pre-pharmacy program. And then I took a chemistry class at 8 a.m. winter quarter that didn't go so well.
Minnesota?
That's the only D of my academic career, and decided I needed to find something else. And actually, it took me a couple of years. And I did some volunteering for the college radio station, and I remember the first comment that came from one of the managers at the radio station was that I was not mic shy. I guess I've never been known for being shy in any regard, probably. But I kind of took to it and had fun with it, and I got a job right out of college. I took an internship as my last academic experience, and I finished my internship on Friday and started a job on Monday, and so that was 40 years ago. I started that job the day before Election Day 40 years ago.
So you were the accidental reporter?
Could be. I actually, when I took the internship, it was in a small station in Rochester, Minnesota. And by the end of the internship, I was producing the noon news, writing most of it, and I was going out and shooting news film in the afternoon, and then writing news stories and putting it together. And I wasn't real sure which end of the business I would end up in, and just kind of gravitated toward this. You bet.
What time did your broadcast class start in the afternoon or evening?
Not at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Not at 8.
Tell them what the people,
Huh?
Dad, tell them, go to.
Well, you need to go to the mic if you're going to talk, is what I'm saying.
Dad says.
This is my
Dad,
daughter.
just-
This is my daughter Kate, who's put up with a lot
Hi.
over the years.
Should tell them what they said in your hometown when you told them you were going into TV.
Well,
Because
yeah.
that's
I-
definitely different from what they would expect, I imagine.
Yeah, it's in line with Rex's story. I grew up in a little town in Minnesota, about 850 people, and my dad was an electrician, owned the local power company, and I worked for him in summers and weekends, and we were in a coffee shop one day, and one of the guys there said, what are you studying? And I said, TV, and he said, oh, we could use a repairman. And so thought I was, the biggest mistake there is that they thought I was coming back to Jasper, Minnesota. But
Do they have TV there yet? Or is it, they're working on it?
First of all, congratulations on all your success and best wishes for the future.
thank you.
Also, same with Mike too.
Thank you.
And good luck.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
I have a couple show suggestions. One thing that I wouldn't mind seeing is Jim Shella and Mike Ahern doing a show together.
Okay, we've done that.
I think if you watch the Muppets, those two old guys on the balcony. Been done. It's already been done.
And I have a suggestion for Ann and Mike for a show. You know, they have all the reality shows where it's like wife
Mud baths
swap.
and stuff.
They have trading spaces. How about a party swap, where Ann is a Republican.
I tell you what,
We could give each other's answers, believe me.
Yeah, we probably could.
And they can both sell an answer they don't believe in.
No.
Excuse me.
Actually, that's a good
I have
idea.
done that on a few times here. I tap dance like Shirley Temple when our party does some of the crazy stuff it does. And Ann will do the same on occasion. But, you know, that comes with, we both felt a responsibility of having that title under our names, Mike McDaniel, Republican, Ann Delaney, Democrat.
Right.
We feel a responsibility for carrying that torch in this conversation, and I think we both took that pretty seriously.
I think that's correct, because you get a lot of people, you know, a lot of people look at it just for news and information, and a lot of party people watch it so that they can understand exactly what's going on, and they want you to carry the message. They want you to carry what the party line is. They want to feel that you're an advocate for them, and I have people say that to me all the time. I'm sure you do as well.
Yeah.
So you have a certain responsibility. You may not like the particular candidate you have to speak for. You may not like the particular position.
We've done that.
We've done that. But you just have to articulate it, as long as you're not going to be supposedly non-biased like these guys are supposed to be. Well, you're non-biased because you never take a position on anything.
Only
You
on,
know, I could ask you the day of the week and you'd equivocate whether it was Thursday or Saturday or
my
Friday.
policy on day one.
Congratulations for keep doing this.
My
with us.
policy on day one, I would take a position on First Amendment issues or access issues, which I've done, but I've tried
That's
to.
it. That's it.
I said I
But
see.
that's your bread and butter.
I see the world in shades of gray. It's not cut and dry, but that's how
Like
it
the
is.
day of the week.
Yeah, because it might be midnight. It could be 1 foot in one day and 1 foot in another day. That's
I rest my case.
And I will say that when people ask me if I'm more Republican or Democrat, I'd say I'm not either one. I'm for whoever can get the job done.
There are a lot of people. There are a lot of people like that take that position.
I like your show idea though about that's.
Party swap.
Yeah, I mean, the
just-
timing is good and the precedent is set. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that,
just want my commission,
President
that's all I ask
Trump
for.
was a Democrat. So, I mean, there is party switching going on.
Yeah.
The good news is there are no elections in 2017, and I think when people are glad to see Andy Moore commercials again, you know they need a rest.
Yeah.
Is he a sponsor, by the way? I hope not.
I hope not too.
Do
Or
you
Ray
feel like you've
Skillman.
been had? He has elections to talk about. and now
We've talked about that already a little bit. I think one of the first things I said to him after it was announced that I officially got the job was, yeah, thanks for leaving me in just before a year when there's absolutely no elections to talk about.
You know what? The interim study committees are often underestimated. They have a lot more.
You joke,
They're a lot
but man,
sexier
oh man.
than you might imagine.
I think we'll find something to talk about.
Well, you got the legislature, and don't underestimate their ability to go off the deep end. That's what supermajorities will do for you.
No, I'll tell you.
Is there one more question, maybe? We'll wrap up.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Marshall.
That's up high.
This has been a great event. Jim, what brought you to Indianapolis?
The job at Wish TV. As I said, I went to college in Minnesota. My first job was in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where I covered the 1980 caucuses. Got a chance to interview a lot of big-name politicians. Covered, Teddy Kennedy, Jimmy Carter. Interviewed George Herbert Walker Bush and others. Ronald Reagan. I interviewed Ronald Reagan a couple times. I covered Ronald Reagan when he was the keynote speaker at the Waterloo, Iowa Chamber of Commerce annual dinner. And then I went to Grand Rapids, Michigan, where again got the opportunity I moved there in the middle of 1980, so I got there when it was one of the key battleground states, and got to cover Reagan and interviewed Bush there. And then was offered a job here in Indianapolis, and I'd never been to Indianapolis, and thought it might be another stop on the way when I got here, and really have grown to love Indianapolis, and it's my home now.
Well, Jim's been the best political reporter in Indiana for the last 3 plus TV political reporter. Sorry, Leslie, sitting back there, and Nikki and everybody else is here, because I still get to work with these folks. But he really has been the best television political reporter for the last 30 years in Indiana, because he covered the beat every day. He knew what was going. He didn't go home at 4:30 or 5 o'clock if it meant staying late to get the story. He was there, and that's what made him a great reporter. And he's going to be missed even more from what he did at Channel 8 for all those years than he will be from doing this, because he was a good reporter, an outstanding reporter.
And it's also important to recognize the fact that he had been here for that period of time, because that has an institutional memory which is lacking in a lot of new reporters.
That's an
They don't know the way to the city county building or the State House, and don't know the history or the background for a lot of this. So it's really disconcerting that we're going to lose that.
And his list of famous people that he interviewed 30 years ago this year. Jim and I roasted Donald Trump at the press club.
20 years ago.
20 years ago. I thought it was 20 years ago this year. We roasted Donald Trump at the press club gridiron.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Absolutely.
Do you remember some of your lines?
Yeah, but we don't. I will say this: we invited him because he was applying for a riverboat permit to put a boat up on the lake, and so we invited him thinking he'd have to say yes, and he did. And so we talked about that night. He was going to call it Buffington Harbor, and at the time Gary was the murder capital of the United States. At least that was the moniker, fairly or unfairly given to it. So we had some fun with him. We presented some slogans that he probably rejected, like, "If you make it to our boat, you're already a winner." And come to Gary, no kidding, come to Gary. And then Shella had the best line of the evening, of course, when he talked about his hair.
Well, I said everybody wants to know about the hair. It's simple. It's a comb over. It's what Dan Coates would look like if he had $1 billion.
Let me just add to what has been said about the institutional memory, because that needs to be repeated again and again and again, because we live in such a transient media world now, and everybody's sort of coming down the line. You get your assignment, you're there for 6 months, and you move on in all platforms. So to have somebody who could be an anchor, and I'm sure it frustrated many elected officials and would-be elected officials who might have departed, changed course, or and we're hoping that nobody would notice. And you tended to say, "Gee, I remember when," and then you could go find the video, and I'm guessing there were some muttered under the breath, "That Shella, why does he have to spoil everything?" But that's important, and.
Well, it's not just being here and remembering things. I kept pretty good records.
Not like John's mother.
Yeah, not like John's mother, but I did keep a calendar of all the stories I did, and I've had some fun recently at Wish TV when they hire people who are younger than 34 years old. I'll pull up my calendar and I'll ask them what their birthday was, and I'll tell them what story I did on their birthday. But
Brandon, how old are you?
Are you going to write a book?
He tried to do that with me, but mine was a Saturday, so it skipped
he
had
wasn't
the day
working
off.
that day.
Are you going to write a book?
People are encouraging me to write a book. I have an outline. But
Do you have a title?
I do.
If Trump reforms the libel laws, you might want to think about that.
Yeah, there are some issues on getting it published.
There are other issues with
Actually,
it too.
you may not realize Jim is already a published author. You'll want to rush out and get this. It was the official state Who put those
What-
together?
Oh, well,
Justice Shepard would know.
It was the Indiana Historical Society.
Yeah, it was done by the Historical Society. Where'd he go? Oh, there he is.
Yeah,
And there was-
they published a book that it's titled Governors of Indiana, and there's a chapter on every governor, and all of them, with the exception of 3, are written by historians or academics, and Justice Shepard wrote 2 of them, and I wrote 1.
Who'd you write?
The Daniels chapter. It was when Mitch Daniels was in his first term, and there was no history that historians could look back on. They needed a journalist to write it.
So it's just like a TV show where you fill. Got to fill for the rest of the term, only 1 year.
Well, thank you. Thank you all very much
Yes.
for being here today. It's,
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.